If you would have told me a year ago that both Toney and Skyy Moore could be in danger of not making the 53-man roster, I never would have believed you. Well, in this video, I'll talk about why they both could find themselves gone if they underperform at training camp, Butker responding to getting roasted at the ESPYs, top-ranked Chiefs players heading into the season, and more. But first, how about those? Alright, first up, ESPN has been doing their annual positional rankings that are tallied up by executives, coaches, and scouts around the NFL to help rank the top 10 players at each position. So far, Chris Jones is the #1 ranked defensive tackle with a lowest ranking of second, and 80% of voters pulling him for this top spot. Quinnen Williams earned one of the top votes, but in my opinion, now that Aaron Donald retired, it's Chris Jones, Gap, then everybody else. For running backs, Pacheco didn't crack the top 10, but earned an honorable mention, with one NFC scout saying Pacheco is a bowling ball, tough to bring down and faster than he looks. Then when you combine that with the fact that Pacheco could be seen over the weekend working out and training at midnight, he deserved a top 10 spot. I don't care what you try to tell me. For edge rushers, no Chiefs player saw himself on that list, but that's fine. Karlaftis will keep rising as the years go by. I'm calling it now. Then no Chiefs safety cracked the top 10 list either, but Justin Reid did earn an honorable mention, with one NFL personnel evaluator calling Reid a total pro, consistent producer who can create disruption as a box defender or in the alley, competitive in coverage versus tight ends, and finally, does the little things to improve your defense. And that is what truly matters. Next up is tight ends, and it's a real shocker to see Travis Kelce up there at the top spot. Kidding, of course, he's the GOAT. Kittle did take the #1 spot last year, but come on, guys. You want to go with the tight end who had 2 catches for 4 yards and yet another Super Bowl L, or the guy who had 9 catches for 93 yards and back-to-back Super Bowl wins? For me and my house, obviously, I'm choosing Travis Kelce, but it's long been argued that Kittle is a better blocker and the more true, quote-unquote true tight end. So if that's your choice, it doesn't really offend me. What matters most is Kelce is most effective in how the Chiefs use him in their offensive style, and that's extremely effective. Other teams operate differently, and as a result, lose more often than the Chiefs, but that's on them at the end of the day. From here, 3 Chiefs players made the top 10 list of interior linemen, which is extremely impressive. All 3 of the Chiefs' interior starters are on the top 10 list. Left guard Joe Toney is #4, Creed Humphrey is #7, and right guard Trey Smith is I was going to say 9 in Spanish, but forgot, just #9. And since the interior is the strength of the line, there's no surprise that not one Chiefs tackle made the top 10 list. But hey, maybe one day Kingsley Suamataia will change that. And if Jawan Taylor limits his penalties, maybe he climbs the list as well. You never know. It's probably wishful thinking, but still, you never know. One thing I do know, though, is Patrick Mahomes is QB1 in the league, and it's not even close. Almost every single NFL exec, coach, and scout agreed with me as well, with Mahomes getting all first-place votes aside from one person who voted Josh Allen. Joe Burrow actually ended up second, though, with Josh Allen third, Lamar Jackson fourth, and Matt Stafford coming in fifth. Now, to the one guy who voted Josh Allen as best in the NFL, if you were voting purely off of physical talent, then maybe Allen takes the cake as the best dual threat quarterback in the NFL. But if you want a guy that wins when it truly matters, a guy who is dangerous in almost every facet of the game, extremely intelligent, cannon of an arm, very mobile when needed, able to identify pressures pre-snap, exploit coverages post-snap, win lots of rings, and boasts the second lowest sack rate only behind Josh Allen, then it's Mahomes all the way. It also doesn't help Allen's case that he is 0-3 to Mahomes in the playoffs, though of course whoever voted Allen first place will say wins aren't a QB stat. And sure, that is true, because if you based it solely on head-to-head wins, Burrow would be better than Mahomes, just like Baker Mayfield would be better than Burrow and Eli Manning would be better than Tom Brady. But come on, man, unless you are high on methamphetamine, Mahomes is in a league of his own. Gap, another gap, then everybody else. Next up, I want to take a look at 2 Chiefs receivers that could possibly find themselves on other teams in roughly 6 weeks. And honestly, 1 year ago, I would have called you crazy if you said this was a true possibility. And those 2 receivers are, no real surprise, Skyy Moore and Kadarius Toney. Both Nate Taylor of The Athletic and Charles Goldman of A to Z Sports listed them as players to watch at camp, with Nate calling them intriguing players to watch and Charles labeling them as players who need to put on strong camp performances or else, basically. For Toney, yes, he's on a contract year and really needs to show out in 2024. This is the last year of his 4-year rookie deal, and he's set to hit free agency after this season, with the Chiefs rightly deciding not to pick up his 5th-year option. Last year was a disappointing season for Toney, to say the least. The offseason started out with the Chiefs reportedly viewing him as their #1 receiver heading into the season. However, Toney injured his knee during warm-ups of the first day of training camp. He literally returned like 5 punts, then needed surgery on his meniscus that caused him to miss all of camp as well as the preseason. He returned for the Week 1 matchup against the Lions, then gifted Brian Branch a pick 6 and dropped multiple passes in that game. The rest of the season was lackluster at best for Toney, as he caught just 27 passes on 38 targets for 169 yards and 1 touchdown. So he went from being the team's reported wide receiver 1 in the offseason to averaging just 2 catches for 13 yards a game in the regular season. Then he didn't play a single playoff game due to being injured. Then when he said, "Hey, I'm not injured," the Chiefs removed him from the injury report, and instead he was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. So now that Toney's last year is here, will he ball out, considering he should in theory be wanting a second contract somewhere after the conclusion of this season? Or will this year look similar to the rest of his NFL career so far and not amount to all that much? Well, Nate Taylor says that if Kadarius Toney doesn't do well in training camp, he could be a candidate to be traded ahead of August 27th, the NFL's annual cutdown date. And if that does happen, that would create $2.5 million in salary cap space for the Chiefs with no dead money. Honestly, I have no idea who would trade for Toney, but if some team takes a hit in the receiver room and need a potential punt or kick returner, Toney could in theory be their guy, and the Chiefs would have to trade him to save any money at all, because if you release him, all $2.5 million of his salary is also dead money. And that's how, in theory, I think the Chiefs should use Toney if he makes the roster as the primary punt returner, because he's been pretty reliable back there. He's had his ugly drops on offense, but has proven himself to be one of the most effective returners on the roster since coming to Kansas City. Now, the next receiver to watch for at camp is Skyy Moore, who is, quote, likely to compete with Toney for regular season snaps if both players make the initial roster. Nate goes on to share that if Skyy is released or traded on cutdown day, it would free up $1.29 million in salary cap space with less than $500,000 in dead money. Skyy is a guy who, if he has a great camp, could maybe fill in for some of Rice's role if Rashid gets suspended this year. After all, that's Skyy's ceiling, in my opinion. A guy that can maybe fill in for some others, with his floor being he could also find himself traded or even cut from the team, though I would think a trade for Skyy is more likely. So yeah, not only is there a path where both Skyy and Toney do not make the 53-man roster, but they could both also be potential trade candidates. I would think Skyy is someone a team would be more interested in of the two. He's a former second-round pick who works hard, is liked by his teammates and coaches, still has this season and next season on his rookie contract, so cheap guy, cost-controlled, and has stayed relatively healthy, minus the knee injury he had that caused him to miss the entire playoff run last year. Then he probably wouldn't cost all that much in trade capital. On top of all that, Skyy then comes with literally zero drama attached to his name. However, that's also why if I had to pick one of these guys to make the 53-man roster, I think Skyy is possibly more likely than Toney due to those factors. But what do you guys think? If you were the GM, okay? If you were Brett Veach and both Toney and Skyy had pretty underwhelming training camps, would you look to trade them both out of Kansas City or keep one of them? If so, are you going with Toney based on his extremely high athletic ceiling when healthy and on the field? Or are you going to go with Skyy Moore due to still having 2 years left on his rookie deal and contributing to much less drama? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And speaking of the wide receiver room, Tyler Webb of Sleeper NFL put together a graphic that shows the percentage of total spending each team spends on their wide receivers. And thanks to having the best tight end in football on the roster, Travis Kelce, and 4 wideouts still on their rookie deals, Skyy Moore, Kadarius Toney, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy, the Chiefs spent the 9th least on receivers, coming in 24th out of 32 teams, just 9.5% of their total spending is on receivers, with Hollywood's cap hit being the biggest at $8.2 million. Then Justin Watson's is actually next at $2.9 million. Then you got the 4 rookies, Toney and Worthy at $2.5 million, Skyy at $1.7, Rice at $1.4, and then Mecole Hardman is way down there at $985K. There's also Nico Remigio and Justin Ross to consider as potential roster hopefuls. Ross is making $915K and Nico is making $800K. All in all, the Chiefs have found a way to keep the room extremely cheap and still have great success after trading away Tyreek Hill, one of the best in the entire NFL. And this is a trend that could continue, but once Travis Kelce retires, I will be curious to see if they can keep getting away with it. And then Harrison Butker responded to the comments made about him during the ESPYs. I shared more about this in last week's video, but the summary is, during a moment of the ESPYs honoring women's sports, the Venus sisters and actress Quintra Brunson took a second to call out Harrison Butker, who was actually in the audience. They said, "So go ahead and enjoy women's sports like you would any other sport because they are sports." Then immediately after that statement was made, this happened.
Yes.
Except you, Harrison Butker. We don't need you.
At all. Like ever.
Well, the day after this, Harrison Butker released a statement, so that was Friday, July 12th, saying, "I thought Mrs. Williams was a great host and applaud her for using her platform to express her beliefs on a variety of topics. Sports are supposed to be the great unifier, and at an event dedicated to celebrating a diverse group of men and women who have accomplished great feats, she used it as an opportunity to disinvite those with whom she disagrees with from supporting fellow athletes." And while that is kind of true, many are saying, hey, this was just a joke and Butker took it a bit too serious. Others, though, say every joke has some truth built into them, and these ladies didn't seem like they were joking at all. All in all, my personal opinion, I do not really care all that much here. Butker was free to say what he said at that graduation. These ladies were also free to say what they said at the ESPYs, and the best part about this country is we are all free to disagree or agree with one side or the other. I also want to note that supposedly Harrison Butker's jersey sales once again skyrocketed after this ESPYs incident, according to ML Football, but sadly, this account did not share the source of these claims and never answered my DMs asking where he got this info. So for now, I wouldn't take this info as canon. I could see plenty of people rallying and buying more Butker jerseys, though, just like they did months ago after he faced the initial backlash for things he said during that graduation speech. And that's going to do it for today's news update, with much more coming tomorrow because the Chiefs quarterbacks and rookies report to camp. Then Big Red and Mahomes are going to be speaking to the media around 2 p.m. Central. Top of all that, the rest of the team will report on Friday with the first available public training camp practice taking place on Sunday. So it's almost here, everybody. Buckle up and hold on. The drought is almost over. And until next time, tomorrow, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?